Can we just skip over the part where I left for 18 months? Okay, so I know it's been a long time. I've been away doing other stuff. And what better way to return to YouTube for a while, but with a good old graphic novel collection update. And I haven't done one of those in almost 2 years. So a couple of new books has arrived and a lot more has actually left, because last time I did an update, I think I had about 350 or so books. And I am now down to 315. So there has come in some new books and I have sold off some other ones. And if you watch the video, and you've been on this channel before, you might notice which ones have left and which one has gone. That's the same thing. And for where I've been, just same old stuff, just trying to make my own small business on the side of working in a grocery store. That's the life right now. And just taking your time on building your craft and everything. And I would like to talk more about it in the future. But for this video, let's stay with good old friendly comic books. So, hope you liked the update, and thanks so much for clicking on the video. Yeah, that is probably the best angle that I can do to start off this collection video. Furthest to the left, we have The Private Eye. And as you can see, I kind of put it on its side because it's an oddly shaped book. But that's what you have to do sometimes, just to get it all to fit in there. So yeah, Private Eye, Brian K. Vaughan, Marcus Martin. It's about how the internet has been away because of a cloud burst, and we're trying to bring it back. So yeah, haven't read that in a while, but sure was good enough to be kept in the collection, so there it is. And then the book that I just pulled out, Deadly Class, Recommender, the only Recommender book I think of his own creations that has stick to my collection, because I've read a ton of Recommender stuff, but I think this one is the best. And then we go into the DC Absolute. Of course, first one we have is Batman Hush. That is my very first Absolute, and it's gonna be here till the day I die. So yeah, starting off strong with Batman Hush. Then we have Absolute Batman Three Jokers. I think everybody that has this has it because of the art. I have it both because of the art and the story. And yeah, I just love it. It's 3 issues. It's a one-sit read. It's great. It's either that or watch a movie. I don't know which you would prefer, but yeah. Superman or Absolute Superman Batman by Jeff Loeb, Ed McGuinness, Michael Turner. This one has also been in the collection for a long time, and it's basically because of the Supergirl story that I keep this. It is awesome, and the Michael Turner artwork within that. And then we have Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman. Highly recommend you reading this. This is one of the best Superman stories, actually. I think I've read this twice, but I loved it so much every time I do so. And then we have Absolute Watchmen. I had to get this after I had bought the Doomsday Clock. I upgraded my deluxe hardcover to the Absolute version, and I'm very happy with that because just because of how much this has affected modern comics and all. And the artwork is great, oversized. And then we have some art books. We have Icons by Jim Lee, pressed by Titan Books. I don't think you can buy it in this format anymore, but I think the graphic ink that DC put out with Jim Lee is probably the same material as this one. Not entirely sure. but I think the amount of pages were about the same. Then we have the Art of the Batman. I love this movie, so yeah, here it is. And now it's only like 2 or 3 years until we get another Batman movie, and I cannot wait. Jewel Art, Kazuki Takahashi, that's Yu-Gi-Oh! Illustrations, the cards, one of my first big anime manga series that I kept on reading through. Then we have the Marvel art of David Mack. Just pure art and cover art within it. And it's wonderful. And then first to our right, we have the Attack on Titan Colossal Editions. So here begins the manga section of a collection. And yeah, it's the best thing I've ever read within a manga. And let's go to the next box. And further along in the next box, we just have the final 2 volumes of the Attack on Titan Colossal Editions. And then we start off with the Full Metal Alchemist hardcovers, volumes 1 to 12 in this one, and the next one we follow up with the final volumes of that. This is a series that is my brother's favorite manga series, and so I bought into it, wanting to know what he finds about it, and as a story of 2 brothers, yeah, it's great. Next box. And on this shelf, I kept calling it box, but yeah, it's a shelf. We have the final volumes of Fullmetal Alchemist, goes up to volume 18. Then we have the all-in-one edition of Death Note. Death Note is a very good introduction series for if you haven't read any manga before. I think it's a very good entry point, just to have a feel of it. You know, it's black and white artwork, not in color, and you read from right to left instead from left to right and all of that. And it's an overall very good story, I think. And just a 36, 38 episode anime series, I think. And then we have the 3-in-1 up until the final 2-in-1 volumes of Yu-Gi-Oh! And although these editions are pretty cheaply made, I think the quality is lacking within them. They're the best way for me to collect them as to have as little volumes as possible on this graphic novel collection. So yeah, that is it for the manga shelf. And here we go with the start of the IDW collection, starting off with the TMNT books, 16 volumes as of now, as of this video. Volume 16 here is still in the shrink wrap, but cannot wait to get into this. Actually, this is one of the few series that I have not reread, not even once. So I have to do that just to know if I really gonna keep on going with this, because although they look gorgeous on the shelf, they take up a lot of space. So yeah, I really should reread this series. And then last off, we have the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin, of course. Then we have the IDW Transformers collection, phase 1, 2, and 3. We're gonna see all that. The first 8 volumes here, phase 1. These were, even back like 5 or 6 years ago when I started buying these, they were, oh my god, I think it's even 7 or 8 years back. They were incredibly hard to find. I think volume 4 was the trickiest one to get a hold of. Or, I don't know, whichever one had Starscream on it. That was the tricky one to get. And then we have phase 2, 2 volumes of that there. And then moving on as we go to the next shelf. And here, as you can see on the next shelf, we have the rest of the Phase 2 volumes, as well as the entirety of the hardcovers that they released of Phase 3. And this is also a series that I've never reread from the beginning, and I really should. And unlike many others that has read the Transformers IDW series, I much more prefer Phase 1 actually. And Phase 2 is great, and Phase 3, I don't know what they want to do with it. I just know that it all leads up to Unicron, but they never had the time to publish those stories in hardcover. So that's really sad, but if I were to reread all these books and only find that I want to keep Phase 1, well, more space for other books, I guess. On to the next shelf. And on this shelf, we have the final book for the IDW collection for this time, the Lock and Key Keyhouse Compendium, which I would really call an omnibus, but IDW doesn't really use the word omnibus in that format. But that is what it is in terms of size for most other omnibus we have, and it's a great read by Joe Hill, the son of Stephen King, if I don't remember it wrong. The son of Stephen King, if I don't remember it wrong. And yeah, that's it for IDW, and then we go into Image, with starting off with the Big Heart Sex Criminals by Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky. Yeah, what a team up, and crazy stories overall. It's fun, that's why it's still here. The same thing with Chew by John Layman. It's just fun. And then we have Jonathan Hickman, and is it John Dracota? East of West. Then we have Lazarus, volumes 1, 2, and 3. Awesome series. And I think there is a volume 4 coming out sometime to wrap this series up, I believe. So that's Greg Rucka on that. We have Revival, Tim Seeley and Mike Norton. I think this would make a great TV show one day. It gives me the vibes that sort of the Hannibal TV series had back in 2013, 2015, long ass time ago, and that series got cancelled and breaks my heart every time I think of it. But yeah, that's what this reminds me of. Okay, so on the next shelf row, we continue with some Image books. We have the Invincible Compendiums 1, 2, and 3. Have reread them in that format. It's great, even though that there's sort of a downgrade by the size of artwork, because my previous versions was the Ultimate Collection, which was a deluxe size hardcover like these Fable volumes. Still great, yes, more compact, and you know how it is in this collection. We try to keep the volume number down as much as we can. And after saying that, we directly go to the Fables collections, which we know have compendium formats, which would absolutely downsize the volumes, but I won't do that because these volumes are gorgeous, and it took me forever to get a hold of all of them. And a lot of these are out of print now. So the entire Fables collection, now with even volume 16, which has the DC logo instead of a Vertigo one. But I won't let that bother me. Story is great, I think. So here it is. And then we have probably one of Jeff Lemire's greatest series, Sweet Tooth, volumes 1, 2, and 3. And Jeff Lemire is actually one of the few creators that I've had the chance to meet here in Sweden. So he signed this volume 1 book, as it was the only hardcover book that was released at the time that I met. And then we have Brian K. Vaughan's space opera, Saga. and with artwork by Fiona Staples, volumes 1, 2, and 3. And hopefully one day we have volumes 4, 5, and 6 to complete this epic story. And last but not least, my one and only Terry Moore book, Rachel Rising Omnibus. And yeah, onwards towards more Image books. And then we have Day Tripper by Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba. If you haven't cried reading a comic book series before, this might be the one. Just saying. And then we have yet another Alan Moore book. As I showed you Watchmen before, we have V for Vendetta, the deluxe sized edition. This is one that I contemplated on buying in absolute format, but I think the artwork is served as good as it is in this deluxe format. And then we have some Swedish comic books from Apart. The Love Hurts Deluxe Edition by Kim W. Anderson. I haven't actually reread the stories in this one, but gotta support our Swedish comic book writers and artists. And from the same writer, we have Elena with its movie cover here. And yeah, the Love Hurts one is just great short love stories, and Elena is a sort of a horror comic. And then we have one of my most pressed possessions, which is the Jim Lee Millennium Edition. The Wizard collects the works of comic artists and masters, or whatever it says here. This has some of the earliest Jim Lee artwork and sketch work that I haven't found anywhere else. And of course now I don't get up any sketches, but here, yeah. These are some artworks that I just won't find in any other Jim Lee artworks, and I'm a huge Jim Lee fan. I mean, I've sort of relaxed a bit more about collecting everything that Jim Lee has done and going after quality over quantity here, but yeah, this one, love flipping it through. A good reference book if you want to emulate the art style of Jim Lee. Of course, I could never 100% do that, but it's still fun to have that as a reference book. And yeah, moving on to more Swedish comic books. And here on this shelf, it is actually 100% Swedish comic books. And first one we have is Herman Hedning. We have these collection boxes. Herman Hedning, Totalitarian, everything from 1988 up to 2088. So this man is gonna do this series forever. That is what he says. And yeah, we have all of these. These are the only type of Kickstarter books that I have in my collection. So pretty much each one is signed, and we have a lot of history of this strip comic book, as well as the entire comic book strip collected. And as far as now, they've gone up to collect up to 2012 with this volume, and there are more volumes that are coming up, but this writer has had a lot of struggles when it comes to just pure bad luck, when it comes to their warehouse and studio burning down and everything, and then had to kickstart again just to get that up. It's just pure tragedy when it comes to just struggling artists, but this is putting it up like 100% on that struggle, and all the best to Jonas to keep on with his comic book. And then we have some trade paperbacks of Herman Hedning, and then we go into actually my favorite Swedish comic book strip, which is Elvis the Turtle by Tony Kronstam. And he has finally, after a 10-year hiatus, made a comeback with his comic book strip on Instagram, which I now follow. And now I wait each and every week for a new comic book strip to be released. And I think this one, yeah, Kicked in the Groin by Life. Oh, I thought that was going to be the one that he had signed for me. But if it's not that one, I think it's on the other shelf. Let's take a look. So we don't really have a lot of books on this shelf, but I made a sneak peek and I know that this volume here, Say Hello to My Little Friend, has, yes, it has a signature by Tony Kronsheim on it. So he drew me when I was wearing my Assassin's Creed outfit at the time at Comic-Con, and himself in the same outfit, or Elvis in the same outfit. So yeah, really glad that he's back making comic books. And while we're at it on this shelf, yes, we now have Lego introduced into the collection. And here you can see the official Lego Transformers Bumblebee, as well as a little gift that I gave to my girlfriend, which is the house from the movie, the Pixar movie Up. So yeah. Of course, this is also potential shelf space for more books in the future. But it's nice to see a little shelf space now and then. And on this shelf, we now start off with the Marvel collection. And once again, as you can see, more shelf space, which is probably gonna be filled pretty soon because there is a lot, or not a lot, but quite a few Marvel Omnibus that is coming up and has come out but just hasn't arrived here yet. Daredevil being one of them. And yeah, let's take a look. We have the original graphic novels by Rick Remender, yet another Rick Remender book that actually has stayed, the Rage of Ultron original graphic novel. Then we have the Amazing Spider-Man Family Business by Mark Waid, and Daredevil End of Days by Brian Bendis, which is always going to be like a good, just end story, Dark Knight Returns kind of Daredevil ending. Not in the same story kind of way, but just a good bow to wrap up the Daredevil mythos. And then we have Secret Wars by Jonathan Hickman. I'm not gonna buy the omnibus. I think the only thing that you actually need is the main story itself. At least if you go from reading the Hickman Avengers up until Secret Wars. Then we have Tom King's Vision. I've reread that quite a few times and I love it each and every single time. That is staying. And then we have the Dan Slott Amazing Spider-Man hardcovers that has not yet been collected in omnibus format, but one day I'm sure they will, as they complete all of this work in omnibus format. So we have the first volume when he returned. And then we have the Worldwide era, which I think is so underrated from the Dan Slott's era. And of course, most people love the Superior Spider-Man. I do as well, but I think this is a good second to top that. And then we have our newest Spider-Man book, or title that is out there, The Ultimate Spider-Man, by Jonathan Hickman. And right next to that is a classic, The Complete Black Costume Saga, which is very controversial just because of the missing pages and the PDF that you got sent out instead of having a replacement printed volume. But here it is. I sold the Epics trade paperbacks so I could get this. Now I have it, and I am one more PDF in my computer hard drive as well. So let's move on. There's a lot more Spider-Man books to show. And as you can see on this shelf, it's packed with even more Amazing Spider-Man omnibus, and it's sort of a mix between modern and Silver Age, or not Silver Age, but yeah, you know, older Spider-Man books with all the way up to the Nick Spencer run. It's just because of the omnibus design. And with the white spines and everything, I'd like to keep everything together just because of the aesthetic of how it looks. Mitch Omnibody put it the best. I try to organize it aesthetically instead of, in the correct timeline or anything. It is still in chronological order of how you would read it in the timeline, but of course there's a lot of gaps in between these books that would be filled out with other omnibus that's going to be shown later. But first off, we have David Michelinie and Mark Bagley, Volume 1 Omnibus. I went with the Venom Carnage cover, as you can see. Then we have the J. Michael Straczynski run, one of the best runs actually. And then of course there's some controversial storylines within these volumes, but I still love them. And then we have the Brand New Day Omnibus Volume 1. Gonna need 1 or 2 more volumes to complete that era. And then we have the Amazing Spider-Man by Nick Spencer, Volumes 1 and 2. And actually ended up really liking Volume 2. Nick Spencer made some brave moves with his Spider-Man run. I'll tell you that. And let's move on to the next shelf. And on this shelf row, we continue with stacked up, full on shelf omnibus everywhere. And yeah, we keep on with the white spined omnibus just because of the aesthetic design of it. And we have Spider-Man, Miles Morales, final volume with Brian Michael Bendis writing him. Then we have Jonathan Hickman Avengers, the Daredevil by Mark Waid and Chris Samney, followed by Daredevil by Charles Soule. The Young Avengers Omnibus, which that was a great read. I had waited so long for them to actually make an omnibus of it, and it did not disappoint. I think the miniseries in between the big two maxi series, there's like 2 12-issue maxi series within it, and then there's all the Civil War stuff tie-ins and some other tie-ins from another series. They run into the Runaways within one of them, and I think those were kind of dragged on, but you can just open this up, read the first and last story arcs of the book, and it's great. Then we have the New Avengers Omnibus, Volume 1, and there is probably gonna be a Volume 2 released in the future, just because we're reprinting this now. And yeah, if they actually do come through with it and make a Volume 2, I'll buy it. I had it previously in the deluxe size edition, but I sold them off because space and hopes that they would release the Volume 2. Then there's the Spider-Verse Spider-Geddon Omnibus. This I got as an upgrade for my Spider-Verse Deluxe Edition, praying for a better mapping of the issues, and we got it. Then we have the Spider-Man by Chip Zdarsky, and then the Jonathan Hickman Fantastic Four, Volumes 1 and 2. This one I really need to reread because I remember loving this. It's my one and only Fantastic Four books. And yeah, the same goes for Jason Aaron's 4 Omnibus Volumes 1 and 2, the complete Jason Aaron 4. The only books of the Mighty Four that I have, and I can settle with them as well, because this is all I need. And then, as mentioned before, the Runaways by Brian K. Vaughan and Adrian Alphona. Then we move on to the next omnibus shelf. And on this shelf, we start off with Alias by Brian Michael Bendis. Going on to our first Grant Morrison book for this collection video, The New X-Men. I don't have a lot of X-Men, but this one, I think it's a nice walk in, walk out omnibus. The same goes for Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men. And that's it for the X-Men books, actually. Maybe I'll jump on the Jonathan Hickman X-Men Omnibus whenever they make a complete run of that. We'll see. X-Men is a huge commitment. There's a lot of omnibus involved, and I don't think I'm ready for that investment like ever. And then we have my only Captain America books, which is from the Ed Brubaker era. This is something that I cannot wait to actually reread, but I have to get on to reread the IDW collections first. I have reread these a couple of times actually, but these are great, and they're just in the right era of Captain America, I think, with the Civil War and everything, and the storyline that went on at that time when Brubaker was writing it. Then we have Frank Miller Daredevil Omnibus, as well as The Companion. We're getting a lot more Daredevil from this era, which I have coming into the collection as they are released and pre-ordered. And so, yeah, Daredevil is just, it's such a gem of a character within the Marvel Universe. I don't think he has ever had a bad writer on him. And that is why it's like this whole timeline from Joe Quesada up until now with Chip Zdarsky and everything. Everyone is adding something to the character. Then, of course, we have the Brian Michael Bendis Daredevil. This is the volume that started it all, that kept me on going with Daredevil. I was hooked from the very beginning, reading the back then paperbacks that I had of Bendis' era. Could not wait to get a hold of these. And then we go into the Brubaker era, Shadowland, and here we have the first volume of Chip Zdarsky. Volume 2, as of filming this video, is packed up and is just waiting to be shipped off. Then we have some Star Wars comics. And the only Star Wars comics that I'm ever touching is the ones involving Darth Vader. And the first volume here by Charles Soule, and that takes place after episode 3. And then we have Star Wars Darth Vader by Kieron Gillen. That takes place in between episodes 4 and 5. And then last but not least, we have Hulk, Planet Hulk, which is a great one and done Hulk story and omnibus. And as of that, my only Hulk omnibus as of now. But if I could ever get a hold of the Immortal Hulk for a decent price, I'll jump on that. And on this little shelf row, we have just pure out Ultimate Universe Marvel. We have the Ultimates by Mark Millar and Brian Hitch. Probably one of Brian Hitch's best artwork when working with Marvel. And then we have the Ultimate Spider-Man by Bendis, of course. Volumes 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the death of Ultimate Spider-Man and the beginning of the Miles Morales Ultimate Spider-Man era. They are saying that there's a volume 5 coming out. I have not seen any list for it, but I am happy with what we got right here and now. Let's move on to the Amazing Spider-Man books. And here we have just pure out the Amazing Spider-Man timeline books in, I think, correct chronological order. Starting off with the Amazing Spider-Man by Stan Lee, Volume 2 actually being my first Amazing Spider-Man omnibus that I ever picked up. And then we got in volumes 3, 4, and 5 ever since. They changed up the spine, as you can see, but I'm not rebuying those first volumes just because of that. That is, to me, crazy to do because it's a lot of money to just go around with. Then we have Spider-Man by Roger Stern. I believe that is one of my second Spider-Man omnibus that I ever got, and I think I only I think I only read it the one time, or maybe twice at least. I did have my big Spider-Man readathon back 6 years ago. And then we have The Amazing Spider-Man by Todd McFarlane and David Michelinie just right after that. And after that, we would put the Mark Bagley volumes 1 and then later on the volume 2 as for chronological order goes. And then we have the Spider-Man Clone Saga volumes 1 and 2 and Ben Reilly volumes 1 and 2. And then a big jump into the Superior Spider-Man era. So there's a lot of things in between those, but as you know, the aesthetics, just so it goes on. And then another big jump into the Amazing Spider-Man Beyond, which takes place after the Nick Spencer omnibus. And the only thing I can say is I would be surprised if you would see the Spider-Man Beyond omnibus on this shelf in the next update, as I think that it did not hold up so well. So yeah, let's move on now into the DC section of the collection. Starting off with the DC books, we have all of my deluxe editions and standard hardcover sized editions. First to the left is the Batman Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison. Then we have Under the Red Hood Deluxe Edition, which I think I read everything within a day, just because I love that story so much. I love the animated movie of it. If it ever made it into live action in some way, I think I love that too. Then we have Batman Two-Face, Face the Face, and that just takes place, I think, right before the Grant Morrison era of Batman Begins. And then we have the deluxe size editions of Tom King's run during the Rebirth era of DC, as well as the Button Deluxe Edition right there in between. And then we have yet another Jeff Lemire book, The Green Arrow from the New 52. And yeah, that is signed as well by Jeff Lemire. And then we have the 10th anniversary edition of the Identity Crisis. And then we have Justice League of America by Brad Meltzer, Deluxe Edition. I don't know if they're gonna keep on with these editions or if this is the only one that we're gonna release. I would love to have an omnibus of this era of Justice League of America. Then we have Mr. Miracle by Tom King. There is an absolute. I don't know if I want to upgrade to that. Not yet, at least. Then we have the We Free 20th Anniversary Deluxe Edition, which is a recent added book. And so glad that they finally released a new hardcover of it, actually, because it was one of the few paperbacks that I still had in the collection. Manga books are excluded from that. And then we have Batman The Resurrection of Ra's al Ghul, which I keep because it takes place somewhere in between the Grant Morrison Batman volumes, and just the complete story isn't collected. I think all the Paul Dini issues are not collected within the Grant Morrison one, so that's why I keep that. And then we have Scott Snyder Batman, his very first Batman stories, The Black Mirror. I think this actually still holds up to be his best Batman story. It can be a little convoluted when you're writing for so long with the character, but this one, he didn't know if he would ever write Batman ever again, and so I think that he gave it the most in that story. And then we have Batman The Dark Knight Master Race, and followed by Batman Catwoman by Tom King, finishing up his Batman run with this volume. And then we have volumes 1, 2, and 3 of the Batman by Chip Zdarsky, getting back into Batman after staying out of a single issue game for so long. I bought Failsafe, and it almost made me want to buy Batman in single issues again. Now I'm actually following it
in standard format. I cannot wait for this to be collected in the omnibus format. It probably will be in the future, but till then, I need to know what happens with this story, and that is why I bought the now free hardcovers that has been released so far. And then we have Geoff Johns on Batman with Batman Earth 1. And cannot believe that this hasn't been collected in omnibus format yet, but we have the free standard hardcovers, and I would really like to reread this because I think the Batman by Matt Reeves, the movie, actually carries a lot of resemblance from this type of Batman. And then last but not least, we have The Flash Rebirth by Geoff Johns. The very first Flash story that I ever read, and it got me interested into the character that I didn't know anything about before reading this. So yeah, it said Rebirth, so I thought it would be a great introduction story, but as I've learned a lot more about the DC universe and read other stuff like Geoff Johns' Green Lantern and everything, I see new stuff each and every time that I reread one of Geoff Johns' stories. And now let's move on to the DC collection. Or maybe I'll show you this one. I mentioned Jim Lee earlier. We have a 2015 convention exclusive Blue Line action figure within this one. And that is a art print, not an art sketch. So yeah, so it's a printed Jim Lee's signature there, so it's not really a signature edition or anything. But it's nice to have something to take up all of this shelf space for now. But you never know when you need it. So yeah, that's that. Now let's move on to the omnibus. And here we have just 5 Batman omnibus, but there are 5 huge Batman omnibus. And that is the Batman by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, collecting the Long Halloween, the Haunted Night, and Dark Victory. That's right. And as well as Catwoman When in Rome, which was a story that I'd never read before actually picking up this omnibus edition. So that's nice. It's a complete works of Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale almost. And then we have Batman Road to No Man's Land, as well as No Man's Land Volumes 1 and 2, collecting that whole era of Batman. I think it was in the late 90s or early 90s. And then we have the Batman, the Hush Saga omnibus, collecting, of course, the original Hush Saga that I had in the Absolute, but then also other maxi series or storylines that came up with Hush in them. Now, this shelf, let me tell you, is filled with great books. Starting off with just The Batman by Grant Morrison. I love this era of Batman, and I cannot tell you how many times I have reread the stories, especially within Volume 2, which is basically all of the Batman and Robin issues by Morrison. I've read them in paperbacks, in the Absolute format, in the omnibus, and I don't know, I think I had the deluxe editions at some point, maybe. But, I mean, it's just great. And I'll always get back to those stories and look forward to them. Then we have Batman and Robin by Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason. Also a great story within the New 52. Then, of course, we also have the Scott Snyder era with the Court of Owls. And just great epic stories within the Scott Snyder one, which went on to the Batman Eternal era, and then Batman and Robin Eternal Omnibus, which is sort of like a sequel, but I see it more as a prequel and build up to the rise and fall of the Batman, which is our Bat Family centric omnibus. This is so good that I got a damaged copy. I opened it up, some pages were printed wrong and everything. And that was the one and only time I think that I actually sold off that copy to upgrade into a purely, fixed and proper volume. Just because I love this story so much, I don't want anything to bother me when I'm reading that. And so that is one of the few times that I actually sold off a damaged copy just to get a regular one. And then we have Batgirl by Gail Simone, also in the New 52 era, and my one and only Batgirl book as of now. And I think it's the greatest of them that are out right now. I think what they did with the Burnside omnibus is not really my taste for what they did with Barbara Gordon. And then we have Gotham Central by Ed Brubaker, Rucka. We have just the GCPD and everything that goes on, the day shift and the night shift. This is a great book to get into if you think that the DC universe or any like superhero universe is maybe too corny or cringe or whatever you would say, but to show them that there can be just like gritty, dark stories even within the superhero universe. And so there's not a lot of Batman within the Gotham Central. So it could be a good introduction port for those that hasn't tried out any graphic novels before. And then last but not least, we have a Doom Patrol omnibus by Grant Morrison and Richard Case. And I only bought that because after seeing the Doom Patrol TV series, I must tell you, I loved that TV show so much that is why I bought the Grant Morrison one, just to see how much they borrowed from Grant Morrison into the actual TV show. And I would say that from the first 1 or 2 seasons, they borrowed a lot. And I really, really enjoyed this book as well. And now let's move on to the final shelf row of this year's graphic novel collection update. So now for this final row, we are introducing you to a little handheld action here because the shelf space is just so low that my tripod can't stand here. And so, as you can see before you, we have a almost full-on shelf of Geoff Johns series titles on DC. Starting off with The Flash Omnibus by Geoff Johns, volumes 1, 2, and 3, and then interrupted by the Peter J. Tomasi, Patrick Gleason Green Lantern Corps Omnibus, volume 1, and soon volume 2 will arrive into the collection. I'm very much looking forward to reading that. And then we have of course, Geoff Johns magnum opus, Green Lantern, volumes 1, 2, and 3, followed by what I think is actually his greatest series, which is the Justice Society of America, volumes 1, 2, and 3. These are some of the best stories in DC, I promise you. Volume 2, I think, is my favorite, actually. It reads so fast, everything is interconnected. You get these stories of legacy, of course, because there's a lot of relationships that hands down their personas and everything and their superhero identities to the next generation. And there's a lot of great stories within these ones. Pure classics, I would say. And then we have Teen Titans by Geoff Johns, which it's a great omnibus, but it has a difficult time sometimes when I read it because there's so many stories that goes on as it progresses. We have the identity crisis going on, and then the Infinite Crisis, of course, which affects this title immensely by the half time as you get into it. But still a great read. And keeping on with the handheld camera action here, we have Hawkman by Geoff Johns, Volume 1. Best known for having the worst binding ever within a DC Omnibus edition. And partially that is true. Then we have Infinite Crisis Omnibus. This is, I believe, a second printing edition. I did have the first printing, which is one of the few times that FOMO really had its grips on me, and I wouldn't even call it FOMO because it had been out of print for years, that omnibus, and I bought it for maybe double cover price, and then a year later or so, they announced the very first reprint of Infinite Crisis, and a lesson was learned. So that's a bit of sharing there. And then we have the 52 omnibus. I don't remember if that is a first edition or second edition. Judging by the DC logo, I would say that this is a reprint. And then we have the Final Crisis 10th Anniversary Omnibus, followed by the Blackest Night 10th Anniversary Omnibus, both of which stories I love rereading. And the problem people have with Final Crisis is that it's too convoluted, but I've loved it ever since I read it the first time. And Blackest Night, I think you would love that even more if you get deep into every title that Geoff Johns basically had put his hands on during that era. So if you've read the Justice League Society, the Green Lantern Corps, of course, and some earlier Flash runs, I think you would love the titles that this crosses over to even more, because pretty much every team in DC got its own little three-part miniseries of The Blackest Night, and that is what is collected in that one. And now let's move on to the final shelf for this collection update. And here we have the final row of omnibus, starting off with the Brightest Day omnibus, followed by Aquaman by Geoff Johns. Each time I read that, I think I finish it off in just one day because it's such an easy read, such great story, and it is heavily what the Aquaman movies borrowed into their own movies, into the live action ones, and it's just awesome. Then we have Justice League New 52 volumes 1 and 2, which is probably the greatest Justice League omnibus that will ever be in a modern era, just because of Geoff Johns, Jim Lee, Ivan Reyes, all of the great artists that they could get into that. And yeah, I just love it. The stories are, least to say, epic. And then we have the Wonder Woman omnibus by Brian Azzarello and Cliff Chiang within the New 52 era. And then Superman by Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason. That is in the Rebirth era, as well as Super Sons Omnibus Expanded Edition. I think this is the first time that they expanded the Super Sons Omnibus. I did have the first edition, but then I wanted some more miniseries. And I don't know, I think I preferred the first version actually, because I don't think that those extra 12 issues gave me anything. Once more, lesson learned. And then we have the Animal Man by Grant Morrison, which is one of his best works, followed by He-Man and the Masters of the Universe omnibus, which is a great omnibus. And they even make it work with the DC universe, as it is the DC logo printed on it. So it is one of the alternate Earths, you can say, or the ultimate universes. It doesn't take place on Earth, so it kind of works. And then we have Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon's The Preacher, the 25th anniversary omnibus editions, volumes 1 and 2. If you're not easily grossed out or, I don't know, highly Christian, you'll probably enjoy that book. Otherwise, I think you'd find it very blasphemous. And with that, last but not least, we have Y the Last Man by Brian K. Vaughan. And I don't think I've ever closed that book with dry eyes. And yeah, with that, that is the conclusion of this year's graphic novel collection update. I thank you so much for watching this video. Thanks so much for sticking around, just waiting for a video to come out on this channel again. And to all the new viewers, thank you for clicking on this video. Hope you liked this, hope you enjoyed. And who knows, maybe I'll see you again in the future in a new video. But till then, thanks so much for watching and have a great year. Bye bye.